Hello, you're listening to the GraphGeeks podcast with Amy Hodler and Dennis Urore. Dennis is away today, but I am lucky to have and to get some time with my friend and colleague, Maya Natarajan. Maya has extensive knowledge graph experience in both knowledge graph solutions, but also in both property graph and RDF as well. So, Maya, thank you for getting giving us a little bit of time today. I know you're traveling. You're in New York at the KGC, the Knowledge Graph Conference. Can you tell us a little bit about that conference and what you're doing there?
Sure. First of all, hi Amy. It's great to be on your podcast, and it's fun. I am in New York, and surprisingly, the sun is out. It was raining the last couple of days, so yes, I'm here at the Knowledge Graph Conference, and it promises to be really exciting. I have to say, a majority of the presentations are on LLMs and Gen AI. Naturally, I mean that's the biggest trend right now, right? But it
Yeah.
goes really well with what I'm going to present about. I'll give you a little sneak peek later on. But yeah, most of the presentations, and I'm excited because I get to spend time with ex colleagues.
Mm.
I get time to spend with friends and just catch up, and it'll be so nice to see them. Knowledge Graph Conference. I think it's been running for the last 6 years or so, and I've been to the last three, including this one, and I think it's just getting better and better, and so it's more fun to be here and just meet everybody, exchange ideas, be on the same level when you're talking to people, because when you're by yourself, you don't necessarily have like-minded people, right? And so I feel like Knowledge Graph brings all of us together, talking about the same thing, and definitely, yeah,
That's a
it's exciting.
that's a good point. I wasn't able to attend this year, but the prior events that I've been at KGC, there's just something, for those graph geeks out there. There's it's so nice to not have to explain, like, what is a graph, what is a knowledge graph. It's like, okay, those, like, we all know that. Now let's talk about, like, innovation, let's talk about what's changing. And so I think your point about, like, being in the community where you all have a basic understanding or similar understanding, and then be able to talk about, like, getting more in depth, as opposed to revisiting the basics that you would normally need to do in order to have those conversations. That's probably one of the things that makes, KGC and some of the other graph conferences so special. So yeah, that's a good call out. So what are, I know you're presenting, so can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about?
Yeah, okay, so it's very interesting. This is what I call a fun presentation. In past years, they've always done something that, I mean, I don't know how many of your listeners know, but I was at Neo4j, as were you, right? And so we tend to present about, places we've been at, what they're doing, et cetera, right? This time it's a fun presentation because Amy, you and I worked on a state of the graph project late last year, right? So I'm going to be giving results of those, sharing the results of those of the work we did, and then we also looked at some trends, and so I'm going to kind of state what the state of the graph was at the end of last year, and where I think it is headed this year and beyond. So that's, in a nutshell, what I'm going to do. And I think I call it a fun presentation because it really gets people thinking about the bigger picture of what graphs are all about, and why graphs are where they are, and what we can see from graphs in the future.
So before we dive into the any of the details, and I'm sure, anybody who's there, who's at KGC, should attend your talk. What's the title of your talk and when is it?
Oh, very good. The title of my talk is The Rise of Graph Jobs, the Disappearance of Graph Technology.
Oh, okay.
So I thought I would make it uh, an interesting, it's more conversational than anything else, but maybe that gives you a clue as to what the talk itself might be. But anyway, I'm speaking on Thursday in the afternoon from 2 to 2:30 p.m. EST. Of course, if you're in New York City, you're going to be here and you'll know. And if you're at the conference, please come. And it's going to be in the auditorium.
Okay, great. All right. So can you give us a little bit of sneak peek? I don't want to. I mean, it's a sexy title. I don't want you to give away any big reveals. But can you give us a couple sneak peeks or a little bit of insights?
Sure. I don't want to give too much away, but the title maybe says something about the disappearance of graph technology. Okay. Um, this is, and I know you know it already because we worked on the project together, but you know, where the state was last year. And then we also looked at trends, right? And I think the trends are more interesting than anything else.
Okay.
What is really propelling graph back onto the main stage? That's
Mm,
where I spend most of my talk in. And it's interesting, it kind of breaks out into two different areas. I'm going to give you one trend, of course, is the explosion of Gen AI and LLMs, right? I mean, there's no stopping that force. You know, I think that's full steam ahead, kind of that. And that trend is the biggest trend propelling grass back onto the main stage. But then there's another trend that we've seen just of late, and that is new companies. When I say new companies, new entrants to the graph market and the way they're innovating, you know, and their innovations, I think is another reason why graph is being propelled back onto the main stage because graph has been around for a long time. I mean, I want to say over 20 years, right? And so I want to almost say that new trends are coming up because you have the modern stack, and I think you need to, graph needs to fit into the modern stack, and that's, I'm going to take a look at some of those trends and talk about some new entrants to the market.
okay.
I hope
So
I've given you enough of a sneak peek there.
I know you're being very coy, but no, I understand why. Go to the event. Go to the event. Go virtual to the event. I think they're offering some great discounts, last minute, virtual conference passes for anybody listening. But I'm going to poke just a little bit, and I won't say what are you going to talk about, but can you tell me what you're most excited about, or actually just something that you're excited about in the graph market right now, and maybe that is the Gen AI and the LLMs, or maybe it's something else. Is there something that's has you excited?
Gen AI and LLMs has me excited only because I think the true value of graph is going to be unraveled. That's I think that's did that make sense? As in we all of us who know about graph know how valuable graph is. But I think Gen AI and LLMs are going to make it possible for everybody to know why graph is so important.
So
Because
so more accessible, is that?
yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, absolutely. And I think the biggest thing we all, I mean, anyone who works with knowledge graphs knows the value of knowledge graphs is the context it brings to any situation, right? And that's exactly what Gen AIs and LLMs lack. And so it's got me excited because for someone who's worked with knowledge graphs for a while and trying to really educate people as to its importance, as to its value, and so on and so forth. Finally, I can say, there it is, guys. What more could you want, right? So that's got me excited. But I have to be honest with you. That's one side of it. I think these innovations are actually very as just as exciting because with these innovations, graphs become available and accessible to anybody with any kind of a database. It doesn't matter. I'm talking about one of the trends is
Okay.
this idea standalone graph analytics engine, right? On top of any database. And it's for people who don't necessarily have they don't need to be bogged down with a graph database, right? So that's an interesting trend, I think, and that's another thing that's going to make it more accessible to everybody, to anybody out there.
So as you so again, I think some of our listeners may be able to intuit what you're talking about, but I'm looking forward to following up and talking more after you've presented the material. And I think being at KGC, also getting the feedback of the audience and experts that will be at KGC and kind of hashing out some of these ideas. I do have another question for you that it is, I think, adjacent maybe to what we've just been describing, and how difficult it can be to get graphs people to understand what the value of graphs. This is just purely terminology and maybe a little bit of marketing. Should we should Are we doing ourselves a disservice by using the term graph? Like, is that, because I've had that conversation, I think, this last 2 weeks with several people, like, we should never use the term graph. I'm like, well, I understand the sentiment, but what else? Like, what are the other possibilities? And maybe it depends on who you're talking. Yeah. So I'm just curious, what are your thoughts there on that?
Great question. Graph is a little, it's hard to understand because I think it's been ingrained in our minds since since elementary school that graphs are all about charts, pie graphs or whatever it may be, right? Pie charts, bar graphs, so on and so forth. However, I still think graph, and when I'm just thinking about it, you've got relational databases which don't make sense at all because where, where are the relationships in a relational database, right? So you've got that. That's a misnomer. Then you've got NoSQL databases, which are also kind of a weird, awkward name. I mean, SQL relational, so NoSQL. I think that's how it came about. Actually, I have no idea. I don't know how NoSQL came about. Do you?
No, other than it's not sequel. But there's a funny story of somebody we used to work with, and I won't name him here, but he was a CMO at a place we worked at. But he used to say saying no sequel about graphs was just about said nothing about the different technologies. It was as useful as saying I'm a non-German. It's like, and there's four people in a room, and it's like, well, okay, but who are you and where are you from? Yeah, so it's, which I find is a funny way to put that. It's like, how that is just so not helpful. So that's an interesting point. Like, we do this all the time in technology, and
Yeah,
y- y-
we name things without really thinking about it, right? I
mm,
mean, maybe relational. I don't know. I still don't
yeah,
see. Maybe because we're wiser now and we know relationships are involved, that we can go back and say, "Hey, that was not a great name," right? But NoSQL, I have no idea. And I was just going to say, and Graph got dumped into it like it was, or lumped with it, because there was no other place for it, right? And now I think, I mean, I'm starting to just say, hey, there's relational, there's NoSQL, there's graph database. Those are the types of databases, right? And then I always wonder where vector databases fit in, but that's not my problem right now. Do you know? I don't know. Where do vector databases fit in
yeah.
that?
I think the point you're driving home though is, the terminology we use doesn't necessarily at some point it serves a purpose, maybe initially, and at some point we kind of grow beyond that, and so it seems like a bad idea. But at the time, it served a purpose and a reason, to differentiate, what we're doing. And as we look in hindsight, 10 years after the fact of anything, it's kind of hard to say, well, we shouldn't have done that. The fact is, this is where we are, and so so I kind of go around and around on the graph terminology of, if you're this is where we are now, and this is how people understand, graphs who are in the industry, and that it's maybe just the level of what you're talking to. So if you're talking to a business person, you're talking more about network analytics, customer 360, um, exploration, network exploration, analysis, things like that. And then when you're talking to a practitioner, it's okay to say graph. At least that's the middle ground I'm taking at the moment. But I could be convinced of otherwise. I don't know. Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think you're right. It's definitely challenging because the minute you bring up graphs, people are like, "Oh my god, what is that? Never heard of it." Or, "Is it a pie chart?" And I get asked that even now, not from just regular folks, right? And I have to take the time to explain what graphs are all about. But once I explain it, and I tell them, hey, if you just think about Facebook, those relationships matter. They're like, oh, yeah, yeah, we know what you're talking about. So there is some recognition, instant recognition once you kind of give a social network example. Although I hate giving social networks as the example because then it's like, oh, that's what graphs are used for, right? And there's so many like really important uses for graphs that are what do you call it,
that
that
are
don't get addressed anyway.
yeah.
So
So age-old problem. I think, maybe in another 10 years, we'll be having the same conversation about something else or still about graphs. I'm not sure.
well, I think in 10 years graph is going to become like part of the database world. I think it
Mhm.
is. It's going to be another thing, SQL, what a relational NoSQL and graphs. I think that's where we're going to end up. I'm optimistic.
Yeah. I'm actually very optimistic about it becoming more, at least graph thinking, graph approaches, whether it's a database or an engine or analytics or whatever it might be, that that it may, and where I'm kind of wondering where we'll go, and I'm sure maybe after the conference you'll have some more ideas, is whether it will become so ubiquitous we'll no longer use the term because it's just a different type of approach to something, or we will use the term and it won't feel weird anymore. So I don't know, but I do think the more, to your point about the more accessible it is and approachable it becomes, the less unusual the terminology seems, and the less explanation that you have to use. So I don't want to take up too much of your time because I know you're probably doing last minute prep for your event and your talk, which I'm sure will be amazing. Your talks are always so much fun. And I'm glad you're taking a fun, kind of a neutral approach to just like, hey, what's going on in the graph market? Because I think it's very important for all of us to get deep into one technology or one concept, to always, to take a step back every so often and say, where's the bigger picture, and how are things going? So I do want to make sure that people know what you're doing now, how to find you. And so if you can tell us just a little more about what you're focused on right now, and if they want to reach out to you later to either talk more about your predictions for the future, and how you can work together, how should they best find you?
So I have my own consulting firm. It's called Node to Node,
Love
and and uh, basically what I do is I help graph technology companies. I've had two clients. One is Neo4j, the other is MemGraph. Take their products or technology to market. Really helping you know folks who don't know about graph understand what it is, and helping
it.
vendors be able to take that to market. Because I always find that
Mhm.
technologists are fantastic. They have this great idea, but
Mhm.
they don't, and they know exactly what their product should look like, but they don't know if it's of value in the outside world. And I bridge that gap for them, helping them understand what it is that customers want. And I help customers understand what graph is all about. So, kind of the marriage between the two. So that's what I'm doing right now. And, you know, I can be reached on LinkedIn. Please follow me. I post once in a blue moon. I don't post as often, but there's always exciting stuff that's going on, and that's the best place to catch me if you
So
wanted to learn more about graphs and me in general.
so I would definitely recommend that. Anybody listening, it's Maya Natarajan, and you can find her on LinkedIn. If you are having trouble, finding Maya, please reach out to me, and I will definitely be happy, to do an intro as well. One thing we didn't talk about today, and maybe we'll follow up in the future when we have more time, is also about use cases. So Maya also has an extensive knowledge graph solutions background. So how knowledge graphs actually get used in the real world, which you kind of talked about it just a minute ago, but just kind of understanding that can, can help people kind of understand the art of the possible really with knowledge graphs. So again, thank you, Maya. I know you're busy. I appreciate the time right before your event. Those listening, Thursday, 2:30 p.m. Eastern time at the Knowledge Graph conferences. Maya will be speaking, and then we'll have her. Hopefully, we'll have you on again at some point, and we can talk a little more deeply about some of your future predictions.
Sounds really good.